Laken Riley was a 22-year-old nursing student at Augusta University in Athens, Georgia. Laken had recently transferred from the neighboring University of Georgia because she wanted to be a nurse. Laken was also a runner. She competed in cross country in high school and continued running recreationally in college. On February 22nd, she decided to take a morning run. She headed over to the running paths near the intramural fields and Lake Herrick on the UGA campus. When she didn't return from her morning run, her roommate called police. Laken's body was found less than an hour later near Lake Herrick. The initial investigation revealed she died from blunt force trauma and her skull was disfigured. Investigators worked quickly and identified a suspect through surveillance video, which showed a suspect wearing a very specific hat. Next, they located a man fitting the description who was wearing the hat. That suspect, Jose Ibarra, was detained for having a fake green card, but not implicated in Laken's abduction and murder. Instead, investigators arrested his brother, Jose Ibarra, who also entered the country illegally. Tonight, we return to the scene as we investigate the murder of Laken Riley.
I'm Vinnie Politan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Closing Arguments. And this case clearly on the national forefront, the national conversation, the brutal murder of this young woman, Laken Riley. And the bottom line is we all lost here. We all lost. You know, for the students and the family, obviously the loss is devastating. But when you think about who this young woman was and what she was going to do, you know, we're in a country where we have a shortage of nurses, people that aren't going into the profession of healthcare. And that's what she wanted to do. So you think about how many other people have been impacted by this because she won't be able to help them get better, won't be able to help them through a really difficult time working as a nurse, because that's who she is. She was someone who wanted to make people's lives better, wanted to make people's days better, wanted to help people stay alive. And that's how we all lost in this. We absolutely did. And as we think about the suspect in this case and what happened to Laken, the question is why? 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 What was this about? What was this about? If in fact, this is the man responsible for what happened to Laken, like, why would you do that? Is this some sort of sociopath? You know, the old looking for an opportunity to strike and he just can't control himself. He has these impulses inside, this evil inside that he has to act upon. Is this someone who was perhaps stalking this young woman and then, you know, had some sort of sexually driven, crazed thoughts in his mind, and maybe he attempted to act upon them? I don't know. I don't know why you would do this. It makes no sense. It makes zero sense. But I think that's a big part of the mystery right now. As when we look at what happened there, is why would it happen? Now, the other question that we have is the evidence strong in this case? Is this a case where prosecutors can go in there, oh yeah, and they've got the goods, and they can prove it? There's lots of different ways. We've heard about some video. We've heard about the recovery of the body shortly after the murder, so there may be an opportunity to get a lot of evidence from there. And we're going to talk about that on the show tonight. We're going to bring in our experts to talk about what the evidence is that you could find, try to get inside the mind. Was this a crime of opportunity? Was this someone who was targeted? But what we did today is we returned to the scene. And we went there on the ground, looking at the area where the body was found, the path that was taken. What does it look like? Like, how could a crime like this be committed in daylight? In daylight. And I mean, he got away with it in that, like, committed whatever act he committed and was able to drag her body wherever he brought it, and no one was there to intervene. Now, investigators believe they've caught the person responsible, but he was able to, whoever did this, was able to abduct and murder this young woman as she attempted to call 911. She knew that there was trouble. She knew she needed help. So, as I mentioned, we returned to the scene today. And when I say we, I mean collectively we. Who I really mean is Court TV producer Cody Thomas, who joins me now on set, was in Athens, Georgia today. Great to see you, Cody. Let's start at the area where Laken was found, where her body was discovered. What did you see? What did you notice? What was it like there?
So we were there on East Campus at UGA today. One thing to note, when I first arrived at Lake Herrick, I noticed a lot of tennis courts. I noticed a lot of people bustling around, and I was looking and I thought to myself, this can't be, you know, where somebody could get murdered in broad daylight like you were just mentioning.
Because all the reports that we've heard, this happened, you know, her body was found near Lake Herrick.
Right, right. Come to find out, as I'm walking through, I'm talking to some students that are around in the parking lot. If you go to UGA, you know there's Lake Herrick, then you know there's a Little Lake Herrick. Little Lake Herrick, a little more secluded, a little more in the brush. And it's more of a pond. It kind of looks like a retention pond, but they still call it Little Lake Herrick.
And is that what we're looking at right now?
That is exactly what you're looking at.
Herrick.
So you see it's not as big as what you would think a lake really is.
When I looked on the map and I looked at Lake Herrick, I saw a pretty large body of water.
Exactly.
And that's next to the tennis courts. This thing is off the beaten path a bit.
Of course.
So it's a little more secluded,
of course,
which makes more sense.
Exactly.
Right? If you're dragging a body at the big lake, someone's going to see you.
With ease. Because when I was there looking around, there was people walking their dogs, again, playing pickleball, playing tennis, shooting basketball, tons of people around. And that's when like I said, I thought to myself, this can't be it. So this right here is the Little Lake Herrick spot. And interesting enough, that is where Jose Ibarra's apartments back up to.
It's right near this smaller area. Okay,
right,
so how far is it from the suspect in this case, where he's living with his brother, to where Laken's body was found?
I would say a football field tops, 100 yards, maybe even less. From the complex, there's a little paved pathway. You come down, and there's student housing right there. There's student housing literally right there.
So where he lives isn't student housing, though, right? It's regular apartment?
Where he lives is a regular apartment, but it's feet away from where students on campus live. I mean, students are getting on and off the bus as we were there. And then you cross over a railroad track, and you get down to the real dirt trails. And we actually took a walk on those trails today, and I kind of pointed out some of the important things that I thought were something people should take note of, and we could take a look at that right now.
Let's take a look.
Now, we're here on UGA, beginning on their East Campus, here at this apartment complex. This is where Jose Ibarra, the alleged killer of Laken Riley, and his brother Diego lived, both who are now in custody. And what I'm standing on right now is that popular cut-through. We've talked to some students since we've been out here. A popular cut-through down to the intramural fields, this paved path that they use as a shortcut to get down to the paths that circulate Lake Herrick. As we continue walking down, we've only seen a few, 2, maybe 3 runners come by, some people walking their dogs. But one thing to note when we get down here on this paved pathway, to my left right here, that's student housing. As you can see, there's a UGA bus right here, a campus bus dropping off kids, picking up kids. Security cameras, if you look closer. These are the only sets of security cameras we've seen since we've been here so far, which means if you're out of that range, you're generally out here on your own. No matter if you have your location on your phone, no matter if people know where you are, that's the only range of security camera footage that they have, that we've seen thus far. As we continue on down, this pathway that Laken Riley took, you see we have a biker coming, somebody down there walking their dog. As we continue down, if you look this way towards the woods, that's where the paths and the wooded trails begin, here at the intramural fields around Lake Herrick. And if you look closer, you can see that is the path that she took on her final run that morning in February. Now, we've just come down that path, down from Jose Ibarra's apartments up toward the street. And as we stand here, one thing to note, there's no fence, there's no barrier, there's no wall between those apartments and these trails that lead to the intramural fields, which means anybody from the street can access these trails. Now, as we come across this railroad track, we come down these stairs, coming down this popular cut-through that students use to get to the trails around Lake Herrick. You can see on either side of me, the brush is very thick, it's a little shaded, and it's a little secluded. Ample opportunity for somebody to hide. Now, we get on down the trail a little bit more, and we see that it diverges off in 3 different directions. Now, as we were walking out here a little bit before, we saw 1, maybe 2 runners going from this direction down to that direction, which led us to believe this is the path that Laken Riley took down to the pond. And again, as we continue down this trail, very secluded, lots of woods, lots of brush, very dense brush. It would be hard to imagine somebody crawling in there and trying to catch somebody by the element of surprise, but we never know until more information comes out. Now we continue down. It's a little rough, a little edgy down here. Maybe 1 or 2 runners we saw before, but this is the trail that people walk their dogs on, students jog on, that lead down to the pond here on Lake Herrick. So we just left that long stretch of land around the trail over there, maybe a 1/4 mile long, little less than that. Somewhere along this path is where Laken Riley was brutally attacked by Jose Ibarra. His apartments are right up there. Now, as I come around this corner and get to this spot right here, it starts to look pretty open. You know, there's trees, there's brush, but as I pan from left to right, it seems as if you would be able to see if somebody was out of place, if something was out of the ordinary. Now, something to note, this is supposedly supposed to be a popular trail by students to run here, but we've been here maybe an hour and a half now. We've only seen 3, 4, maybe 5 people tops. And one last thing to note, there's no security cameras. There's a light post over there, power lines, but no security cameras. So even if you do have your location on, or your friends to track, or your family to track, they know you're out here on a run, it's still up to you for your own protection. Now, ultimately, to my left is where Laken Riley's body was found. Right here, this is the wooded area that the police reports talk about. This is the gravel spill where all the police tape was roping everything off. There's still remnants of it here. And as you come over here to this rock, you can see some type of vigil, some type of memorial, a couple of flowers and a smiley face painted here, probably by friends, family, even community members, honoring the loss of life of Laken Riley.
So the one thing that I'm noticing as you're walking down that initial path from the apartment, as you get to those railroad tracks, I mean, that's like, there's nothing there.
Nothing.
And even the path itself is sort of almost made by just people walking through there. It's not a formal, like that's a formal pathway, but as we're retracing in here, it gets rougher and rougher. She was a cross-country runner.
Right.
So she'd be able to run through this. She's used to running through this. That's what you do.
Right.
That's what cross-country runners do.
And what I was thinking as we were walking down this path, I thought we were getting lost, you know, because I saw a bunch, like I said, a bunch of brush, as I pointed out in there. It all started to seem like it was coming together, and I was asking myself, like, are we in the right spot? Is this? But then I saw somebody, like I said, I saw somebody run from right to left, and I was like, oh, let's follow that. And then that's when we found the pond.
So this is, and we get back to your first point. We're talking about Little Lake Herrick, not the big one. Because this was first described as near the intramural fields, right? So that's the general area, but when you really get specific, it's much more remote.
Exactly, and from where we were standing at, you can't even see those fields. Now, like I said, when we first pulled up and we saw the tennis courts and the basketball courts and people walking their dogs, everything was hustling and bustling, you know, you could see the big Lake Herrick right off in the background. That's where the pavilion is. That's where, you know, the memorial and vigil and stuff was held, where the signage was that says this is Lake Herrick. But back there at that pond, like you said, nothing.
Nothing.
Zero.
Right. The surveillance cameras that you showed, it looked like they were almost not like temporary to a certain extent, like they were popped up for a particular reason, to keep students safe, because, and that's really to keep the students safe at the housing?
That's exactly what I was gonna say, because as you saw, it was his apartment. You come down that paved shortcut, that cut through, and then you look over and you see the student housing. And those cameras are on the student housing parking lot, which leads me to think that, you know, UGA provided those for that purpose, not necessarily people cutting through that apartment complex and running back down those trails, more specifically for those people getting off the bus, going in their dorm rooms, getting on the bus, going to class. And
what's significant is, like, they have video, they say they have video,
right?
But the first person they took into custody wasn't the suspect, it was his brother. Now, obviously there's gonna be similarities between the two, but they were able to pick up the very specific hat he got. So he had to get somewhat close, or these might be pretty good cameras, and it's daylight, so you're gonna have the best lighting possible.
Right, and it was, like I said, once you got off that paved path and you look to your left, you could see it right there. So to my knowledge, to what I saw, based on the path that I walked down there, it was from his apartment complex to where Laken Riley was found, 5 minutes flat. I recorded the whole thing at a normal pace, 5 minutes. But right when you get down that cut through, those are the only cameras we saw. So to my knowledge, those are the only cameras that could have picked them up.
I would think those are the ones where they were able to get this video because it's close to where you are. It's the only ones that are in this area. Initially, again, if it was near the intramural fields, there might be many more cameras.
Many more, provided by UGA, you know.
All right. Now, you mentioned you saw, maybe a handful of people during the morning. How about students on campus? Were you able to talk to them? How are they feeling about all this?
The aura in the atmosphere when I was there was that people are trying to move on. They talk to us. Obviously, sometimes when cameras get brought out, some people don't really want to talk on that kind of record. So they told us, nothing like this has ever happened. We saw people from the community, people that said they've walked this trail hundreds of times. One guy said he was a former professor that said he walked this trail for the last 30 years. Nothing like this has ever happened. But we did finally speak with one student who described the day when he found out Laken Riley was murdered. He said him and his friends were actually headed to the intramural fields, but chose not to go.
Wow. Let's take a listen.
Yeah.
So that day we were actually about to go play pickleball at about 12:30, and that's about the time that she was found, and we were thinking about coming over here to play instead of going over to where we usually play, but we ended up deciding to go over where we usually play, and then so we were just playing for a few hours, and then once we finished playing, one of us got on our phones and saw that there had been like something about a murder, and then we were like, what's this? And then we got a bunch of UGA emails and alerts sent out to us. And we were like, oh, this is like legit. And then when we were driving back over here, we saw the police helicopters circling and stuff like that. It was just, surreal to see and believe that actually happened here.
What's the atmosphere been like since this has happened?
They're a little more apprehensive about things, I would say, like coming out here and running like at odd times, early in the morning, late at night. It's a little more apprehensive to go out there, and I always don't run without headphones or do stuff like that, to be a little more cautious about things, to not have this happen and stuff like that.
Would you come out here and run yourself now?
Not now, not knowing what's happened out there, and now coming back here walking, seeing how desolate it is, I wouldn't take that chance and stay in a more populated area, which we are still close to populated areas. This is just probably the most secluded part of campus.
That is incredibly sad, right? Now you have to think about that. Now, a lot of times when things like this happen on a campus in a school, all of a sudden there's changes. Are there any changes that you noticed on campus?
Oddly enough, there were. When we walked down that path from his apartment complex, like I mentioned, there was no fence. There was nothing separating, the general public from UGA's intramural fields. We came across some construction workers who kind of waved, nodded at us. We talked to them about what we were doing. They said they were clearing off a bunch of branches, fallen leaves, and debris because there's a possible fence that's going to get put up, separating the apartment complex from access to those dirt trails that end up leading to Little Lake Herrick and subsequently Big Lake Herrick.
Wow. Cody, great work. Great work. Cody Thomas, Court TV producer. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to take everything that Cody has brought in tonight and bring in our experts to get their take on what will the evidence be that they'll be able to get from here. What are those cameras going to show us? How are they going to be able to prove this case in court? Plus, coming up next hour.
In Oakland County, Michigan, James Crumbly has been charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for the mass murder committed by his son, the Oxford school shooter. Tonight, we have all the big moments from court.
That's when he went home to look for the gun. And that's because he knew. You will hear that there was one and only one person who called the police that day to identify their kid as a suspected shooter. It was James Crumbly.
The first parents in America to be charged in a mass school shooting.
Involuntary manslaughter and 4 counts of it.
The gun recovered from the shooter was the same gun that was purchased by his father.
Jennifer was found guilty.
Who is responsible for storing the gun?
Now the school shooter's father is set to stand trial.
My husband is.
The school shooter dad trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8/7 Central on Court TV.
The evidence is robust. It is supported by key input from the community, physical evidence, and expert police work. Importantly, we were assisted by video footage from our campus security cameras networks, which proven vital in many cases.
The evidence is robust. I hope it is, because you need to prove the case beyond any and all reasonable doubt. Let me bring in my guests, my experts, joining us tonight in Jacksonville, Alabama, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, host of the very popular Body Bags podcast, forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. In Michigan City, which isn't in Michigan, it's in Indiana, private investigator and founder of Victims News Online, Erica Morris is with us. And in Salt Lake City, Utah, private investigator Jason Jensen. Great to have everyone here. So I want to do this. Cody obviously provided this video and went to the scene. So I want to play some of the video showing the walk from the suspect's apartment to the scene where Laken was found. And as we're watching this, Joseph Scott Morgan, I'll begin with you. What strikes you as significant about the scene where this murder took place and in the gathering of evidence?
I think probably the first thing that jumps to mind, Ben, is the density of the area. I didn't expect it to be this thickly wooded around this path. And also, I think this offers an opportunity, perhaps, if in fact the accused is a stalker of some kind, he may have been nesting in there, and this may have been a crime of opportunity, looking for someone that fits his type. And if that's the case, they might be able to find evidence that he had been doing this for days upon days upon days, just waiting for the right moment to strike.
Erica Morris, as we're walking this path, what are your thoughts tonight about the scene itself?
Joseph makes a great point about the potential for nesting. That could indicate evidence in an area. You could be looking for cigarette butts. You could be looking for a soda can. You could be looking for some type of an indication that somebody was lying there in wait or waiting there for a potential victim to come forward. I'm also going to be looking for signs of a struggle. I'm going to be looking for things like blood, tears on branches. I'm going to be looking for areas that are disturbed, potential areas where I could get DNA, sweat, blood, because this was an aggressive struggle.
Jason Jensen, the other significant thing that Cody was talking about, again, as we continue on the path here, was passing the student housing. And there were cameras there as well. You've got that part of the evidence, and then you've got whatever you're going to be able to find along this pathway in this area.
Right, yes. In fact, the thing that struck me the most watching this and listening to Cody as he walks through the crime scene here is with the railroad tracks and the trail. I had a lot of reflection back to the Monon High Trail and what we're all familiar with, the Abby and Libby case, where the difference is where there was a video footage taken from a security system, they were able to act fast and identify the individual before he got too far away, as opposed to cell phone footage that was discovered a couple days later.
So Joseph Scott Morgan, and here's the Little Lake Herrick, not the big one, the little one. This is the area. If there's this struggle, where would you expect to find evidence connecting the suspect to Laken?
Well, obviously, there's going to be there will be evidence. I won't say there will be evidence of struggle, but obviously, we think about primary scene in our work in death investigation. Primary scene is where the body is located, and then you have secondary and tertiary scenes. So anything that may have been the initial point of contact, if she was, I hate to paint this picture, but if she was struggling, kicking her feet, trying to fight against him, and he is moving her toward one location, you might be able to see some damage or gouging in the ground. Then, as was previously mentioned, drag marks, which you have to have pretty keen eye to pick up on this. But it did happen so quickly, as Jason had pointed out, where they were able to identify a suspect. So that's a win in that particular column from an evidentiary standpoint. We don't know how much blood was shed at the scene, if any at all. I would imagine a significant amount, because as I'm sure we'll get to, we're talking about these injuries that were quite horrible. And looking at this area where the body was deposited, where Laken's remains were deposited, this is one hell of a risk, Vin. We're not back in kind of the heavily forested area back here. We're talking about an area that's well worn, and if that rock pile and that area where the riprap is and all of this, is that the area where she finally came to rest? Boy, this is really somebody that had either no situational awareness or was acutely aware that not too many people were passing by that time of day.
And Erica, that brings us to someone who has to know this area, right? To be confident to do what the killer did here, it wouldn't be your first time there. You'd kind of know a little bit, oh, this is where they go running, you know, and you would have time. You would have opportunity without witnesses, because let me tell you, if there's a struggle going on and there's a couple of guys that are going for a run in the morning, or even women, they're going to intervene. They're going to help each other out on that campus, and must have known that there was time here, but you wouldn't know that if it's your first time there.
No, you know, this does have rings of Moscow to it, and as Jason pointed out, this does have rings to the Monon Trail as well. In terms, I mean, we know that he lived within a stone's throw of where this crime took place, so clearly he was familiar with the area. He was probably somebody who walked that area, or, as we'll find out later, because I caught something in that presser, key input from the community. That tells me they've talked to some witnesses. Doesn't necessarily mean someone witnessed the crime itself. They could have seen him walking towards the trail. They could have seen him acting suspicious that day. They could have seen two men, because I'm also wondering, why are they so focused on the brother? Are we potentially getting ready to see a second arrest? I don't know yet.
Well, one thing, Jason Jensen, that they talked about with the brother was they knew the specific hat that the killer was wearing, that the suspect was wearing, and the brother was wearing that exact hat. And that's why he was initially detained. They kept him because of the fake green card, his brother Diego, but initially he was wearing the hat that they saw on the head of the suspect on that surveillance video. So, you know, I'm looking at this all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, I think I know what the defense is going to be here.
Yeah, it's interesting that the hat is what gave him away. So given the fact that they're brothers and they live in the same apartment, presumably they either both have the same type of hat because they, you know, shopped the same place or visited the same location.
Shoplift at the same place would probably be more correct based upon the history that we know.
Sure. Or at least that if the brother was being arrested for that, he blamed his brother because he knew his brother just recently wore the hat.
Yeah, we're looking at the complex, which abuts right near this area. Joseph Scott Morgan, you know, getting into the mind of a killer is impossible. But if you live in this complex, it's a college town. There's student housing that is like a stone's throw away from here. Like, you know what's going on. You know who's going to be there, and you know that there's going to be folks running. You know this is a path. This is a guy who, you know, on the one hand is familiar. On the other hand, I guess got to town a little while ago after he had to abscond from New York when he got in trouble up there. But at the end of the day, the pieces seem to fit, right? That the killer would very likely come from there based upon the access, the ease, and the familiarity with those paths.
Yeah, there's some level of geographic comfort, if you will, relative to this. That's why I think that this idea of perhaps, and I'm sure that the GBI and the authorities in Athens, Clark County are considering all of this, had he been nesting in there. And there's one other kind of salient point here. I think, had there been any other attempts or similar attempts to this in the weeks leading up to this moment, I think that's going to be important. And in the apartment complex where the accused lived, I wonder if anybody picked up on the fact that maybe he was a lurker, maybe he was a creep, maybe he spoke to women in a very familiar tone, maybe disrespectful, that sort of thing. Anybody that was there that may have made them aware, acutely aware of his presence. And, you know, when they're going around, they're canvassing the area, the police are after this, and they're saying, hey, is there anybody here that really draws your attention? Oh, yeah. Yeah, this guy here, he lives in an apartment with his brother. We see him about, he just kind of sets us off. We don't know what it is, and you hear that lots of times, but there's something about him that doesn't add up or makes us uncomfortable. That's going to be important here as well.
Erica, I want to talk about the 911 call, right? She knew that there was trouble. She knew there was danger. And she had the phone with her, and she tried to make that call to 911. It connected. We don't know much else about it at this point. That will be a big part, I believe, of the evidence in the case, but also puts us into the understanding that at the moment this happened, she knew there was danger.
Correct. And she did everything right. Laken did everything absolutely right in terms of trying to protect herself in that moment. In doing some research on this case, I've learned a couple of things. Number one, that 911 call itself wasn't released. And the reason it wasn't released was because there's an indication that the death itself was recorded. That also tells me that this is going to be a key piece of evidence. Along with that cell phone itself, we could have DNA, we could have touch DNA from the killer, because one of the charges is obstructing that attempt to make an emergency call. So I'm expecting that, you know, they've been testing that for touch DNA, and they already have some results there. There may be some blood, and we could have a voice match as well on that 911 call.
And Jason, you know, and I'm thinking, I think the description, I don't know if it was you or Erica who said this, you know, this is like taking the Idaho student's case and combining it with what happened in Delphi. There's elements of both here. The victim has a phone and has the phone out calling 911. Potentially could have taken a picture as well. I don't know. We don't know. But her phone is going to speak volumes in this case as well.
Exactly. In fact, the thing that I find most disturbing about this is he just went back to the apartment and was just living out his life as if nothing traumatic just happened, that there wasn't the most horrific event that he was involved in, you know, even impacted his thinking. So it's, you know, the psychopathy of this individual is going to be really up there for us all to consider.
And I think what we have to consider is this the first time? Is this the first time? Is this the first victim? Is this the only victim? Are there others? Is there someone in New York? Is there someone in Venezuela? Is there someone in between? Someone that could, so as you said, casually respond to what happened in such a violent act, such a violent, unprovoked act, could respond that way is chilling, is absolutely chilling. All right, our experts are going to stay with us. Joseph Scott Morgan, Erica Morris, Jason Jensen. When we come back, we're going to look at two things. Crime of opportunity versus targeted attack, or maybe something in between. What exactly was going on here? We'll also take a look at some of the information that's been revealed in the arrest affidavits.
We are obtaining arrest warrants for Jose Antonio Ibarra, 26 years of age. He lives here in Athens, but is not a U.S. citizen. He has been charged with the following: malice murder, felony murder, aggravated battery, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, kidnapping, hindering a 911 call, and concealing the death of another.
So in this case, the murder of Laken Riley, there are other charges, and these other charges may tell a story of what happened here. There's not a lot of facts that have been put out there by investigators or by prosecutors in any of the documents that have been filed yet. But on the arrest affidavit, again, you can paint a little bit of a picture, an outline of what may have happened to Laken. Let's take a look. The first charge is kidnapping, where a person abducts or steals away another person without lawful authority and holds such person against his or her will. So there's an abduction in this case. Aggravated assault. He assaults with the intent to murder by causing great bodily harm with an object. So there's some sort of a weapon used here. Aggravated battery, maliciously cause bodily harm to another person by seriously disfiguring her body or a member thereof by disfiguring her skull. Again, painting a picture, a violent picture of what happened to Laken Riley. Hindering 911 call, physically prevent or hinder another person with intent to cause physical harm from making or completing a 911 call. Again, painting a picture of what happened in this confrontation, this abduction, this assault, and then concealing the death of another, dragging the victim to a secluded area. Okay, so let's put these pieces together. Joseph Scott Morgan, I'll begin with you. What do you have in your mind as to what happened here when Laken was attacked?
I think that probably the perpetrator thought that he was going to take her by surprise, but there's an awareness that goes to the phone call. But I think really important here, and this seems rather simple, but we really need to hone in on this. You cannot kidnap the dead. You cannot falsely imprison the dead. So that means he put hands on her, Vinny, and we know that based upon the ag assault and the ag battery charge. So he is physically in contact. I think even one of those items that you've read stated dragging her. That is an active event where he is dragging her away. We've touched on this, but it's very important from a forensic standpoint, because if we begin to think about touch DNA, or if he has injured himself and we have a robust DNA sample that may have been deposited on her clothing is going to be immensely important in this case, Vin. And as to this object, this unnamed object, this weapon, I don't know. That goes to this idea of weapon of opportunity, say something that was lying about, or did he come armed? Again, that goes to his mindset. And that's something I think that probably I'll leave it at this. I'm hoping that this object was recovered and that they just haven't made that big reveal yet, but we'll see.
So targeted versus crime of opportunity. And I almost feel like this is a hybrid of sorts, potentially. Erica, what are your thoughts? And I want to put something else out there, which is what we know about Laken. She ran cross country in high school. She's a runner. She's like a runner, not someone who's going out for a jog. She's like an actual runner. Yet, whatever happened to her, whatever the circumstances are here, she was not able to run away.
Correct. So I think there's definitely an element of surprise there, Vinny. You know, she's somebody, as you mentioned, she was a well-known and well-trained athlete. So I look at things like strength and endurance and the ability to get away. That's, again, why I'm not convinced he acted alone yet. Time will tell. Crime of opportunity, in terms of that question. I think we're going to have a very sloppy initial and secondary crime scene. I think that, you know, as Joseph and I have both mentioned, we're going to have some evidence along the way, from touch DNA to blood to sweat to potential clothing, things that could have been, you know, dropped along the way. So the other thing, I am so sorry I lost my train of thought on that one. Pass to Jason.
That's okay. Jason, again, cross-country runner who has competed, so she knows how to run. She's not out for a casual jog. She's a runner's runner. Unable to run away here. Her skull disfigured. She was dragged to the secluded area where her body was eventually found. What picture do you see about what happened here?
Well, I see, Vinny, Laken being an athlete, she was fit, she fought back. So usually these attackers resort to violence. They escalate their attack upon their victim, including resort to blunt force trauma, grabbing a rock or something, weapon of opportunity, when they're trying to get that victim to submit, because they were hoping that this victim would be submissive upon contact. But she apparently fought back. She tried to call 911, and all of this is going to be recorded in that 911 call, and it's going to be central to making the case, including that the guy was trying to yell back, and she's calling things out, and maybe even a description. So we have to wait to see what all the evidence is. But I'm thinking she fought back. She fought for her life, and he probably had injuries sustained himself, defensive wounds, where it was easy to identify which of the two brothers were responsible for this horrific act, and it was pretty evident. And Laken left her mark.
Joseph Scott Morgan, I get back to that question of why. I'm looking at this guy, like, why? What is this sociopathic? Is this a guy? Is this a thrill kill? Is this, someone who can't control himself? Someone who may potentially be someone that's done this before?
Yeah, perhaps. And is there a method to the way he has attacked Laken and brought about the end of her life? I think that again, going back to what I'd earlier stated about the idea that, are there other victims, other attempts? Is there anything out there that kind of echoes this, where there's evidence that this is something? Because, Vin, and this, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but people that are, perpetrators like this, that act as predators, they have a methodology that they adhere to. They don't like to deviate from that at all, because they feel comfortable in that, if this is something that they've worked out the finer points. So that's something to certainly look at.
Joseph Scott Morgan, Erica Morris, Jason Jensen, great to have everyone together tonight. Appreciate your time.